and we're talking to Paul Drabick, and we are asking him how he got started in comics and how he moved to Brookline and the process of opening a store.
Yes, I opened up my store, Geekadrome, Games and Comics, here in Brookline, but that wasn't quite where everything had started. I first got involved with comics at a very, very early age. My mother, as a way to supplement familial incomes, she would often go around to estate sales, places like that, yard sales, etc., looking for antiques. And then she would in turn pick those up and take them to an antique dealer to flip them. And in doing so, a lot of these antique dealers, people would end up giving them older comics. And I was interested in comics as a child, so my mom would always say things like, "Oh, and could you toss in a couple of those comics for the kid?" A lot of these antique dealers, they didn't necessarily know what they had or what they were doing with them, because people, like I said, would just give them to them. And they say, "You deal with old things, take this." And, you know, to them, I was like, "Oh God, good, get that out of my way so I don't have to trip over it." And I would end up taking my knowledge in the comics, after picking up a few trade magazines and guides from the day. I would go to my local comic book shop at the time and turn those in to pick up my subscriptions. And so I got into learning about trading and monetizing comics at a very early age. And I guess that, through the process of years, ended up multiplying and becoming the store.
Fantastic. Now, I understand you had a background or a job within radio. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, yes. I worked in radio for a few years. Got my starts really just hitting the ground running. I opened up as an intern and proceeded to just do about everything that they had at that location, between sales, event management, and even on-air talent. I spent probably the most time in on-air talent, but we went around producing events, producing local shows, even shows as far as Cleveland and Pittsburgh. But I would say a lot of what's transitioned from my experience in radio was the sales aspect. Because we had to do a bit of everything there, and some of that was included going around to local businesses and trying to convince them, "Hey, you should advertise with us."
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, so what are some of the activities and perks to coming to the store, and what is the store's mission statement?
The perks for customers coming to the store is, of course, you get the personal treatment. I found it just the way that a lot of our businesses are developing, we're losing the artisanal, the personal touch, the bespoke interactions that, quite honestly, have helped made business what it is today. So frequently we find ourselves just being turned into a name and a number that a lot of businesses just don't respect their customers with. We offer the personal touch that a lot of other places can't, and we show that with being able to make suggestions to our customers in things like, "Oh, if you're interested in this comic, then you might like this also. It's in the same genre, or perhaps it's by the same writer or author, or artist."
Okay, so what kind of activities do you have at your shop regularly?
We have weekly events. We do magic tournaments, we do hero clicks, we do Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of these tend to bring customers into the store that might not necessarily be familiar with us. They want to come in for some of the events, and then they eventually start, walking past certain comics or whatever, and go, "Man, I'd like to give that a try. That's a really catchy title," or maybe a certain cover art just catches their attention, and it just piles up from there.
It's fantastic. Well, what would you consider is the best advantage of being in Brookline, South Hills area, and what are some of the disadvantages?
Oh, well, the advantages are we're right in a neighborhood. We are walking distance for thousands of customers that we can easily be, you know, you don't have to drive through 3 tunnels or over a couple of bridges in order to get to us. We are right here in the neighborhoods where people are at. Some of the disadvantages that would also go along with that is we're not necessarily on everyone's morning commute. So for the people that do end up, you know, daily driving through tunnels and bridges and over hills and under dales, and we might not necessarily be just off the beaten path, but we are right by home.
That's fantastic. Okay, what would you say, as far as your personal tastes, what would you recommend to customers, and what genres or comics are you personally fond of?
Oh, that's a good question because sometimes I readjust myself with that daily or weekly. I personally end up finding myself following a lot of the same artists or writers, and whether that's going to be in big name books that they do, like Marvel title or DC title, or whether it's going to be independent, self-produced publishing, even if it's something that they are just selling strictly through their own Twitter page, which I've done and carried some stuff like that before. One of the ones that's actually done the best for us like that was called Cat Hair Apocalypse, and it was a book that it's, to this date, to my knowledge, has only had 1 issue, but the intrigue and the premise to it has endeared so many of our customers. We've probably sold through stacks upon stacks of it.
Okay, well then that brings me to my next question. Can you expand a little bit about your support for indie creators?
Absolutely. Quite honestly, I think that the way that the industry is moving, there's so much of it that is geared toward older, young adult population. Comics aren't necessarily for the little kids, the 12 to 15-year-olds anymore. And a lot of those older people, maybe they get a little bored with seeing the masked caped superhero and everything. Maybe some of that seems a little formulaic. The best places to find stories that can break these molds, or maybe even call back images of other classic stories, is in the independent nature. Places that are self-published or low print runs are able to do things that the major labels, due to how much print they have to put out, how many issues they have to deal with, they can't necessarily take risks on some of these stories as well as a small independent publisher could. Yeah, in addition to the comics, the independent creators of comics, there's also independent artists that I like to try and focus on here at the store. One of them being Eric Hodgson. He's a fantastic illustrator who's overcome a lot of personal setbacks but become a fantastic artist. We have a lot of art here that's based on his wrestling art. He finds different wrestlers that he likes and wants to showcase when he's going around to conventions, and creates a comic book themed cover, usually a tribute to a famous cover that's already been out there, but he does do a lot of other things too. He's done commissions for other famous wrestlers like Mick Foley. He's done a lot of work for, as well as Rob Van Dam. If you'd like to know more, you can check him out. Eric Hodgson Illustrations.
Okay, so what is your stance as far as changes in the comic book industry, and how has it affected your store?
There's been a number of different changes as the direction that comics and the customer populace has been going over the past 10 years. One of the things that I noticed when I first started opening up the store was that it's become a lot less of the boys club that comics has notoriously been known back in the 80s and 90s. A lot more women are getting into reading comics, a lot more female readership, and they really want to have a store that is more accommodating to women, something that's less hostile to them. They want to be able to feel comfortable. They don't want to feel ogled. They don't want to feel like, what is this alien doing here? They want to look around and they want to see things that they recognize and familiarize themselves with. Icons that can be for both men and women and not necessarily excluding anyone. That was one of the things going into it. Going further, I'm noticing that my predictions as far as the comic book industry becoming more personal is definitely going true. People want a bit more of that personal touch. They want the human interaction and less of the, take my money, take the thing, get the hell out. I'm not sure if I could say hell. But yeah, they want the human interaction. They want to be able to speak to someone. They want to have someone that can recommend what they might be interested in based off of what they already know. And beyond that, really seeing a rise in the interest for independent comics. Comics that aren't necessarily what they would be able to look at the cover and just say, oh, I can just guess what happens.
So we've been talking to Paul from Geekadrome in Brookline, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for talking with us today, Paul.
No problem. Thanks for letting me be here. It's wonderful being able to talk about the store, how we got here, the wonderful neighborhood of Brookline, and of course our new website, Geekadrome.com.